Hello everyone and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander deck list reviews. In this series, I go over either my own personal decks or user submitted decks and break them down, talk about the commander, the general game plan of the deck, separate into categories based on what the cards are doing, give my different criticisms based on, whether I think cards should be added in or taken out, and sort of give my general thoughts at the end. If you want to get a deck list reviewed by me, make sure to go to the top link in the description, check that out there. But besides that, let's hop into this review. So here we have Deadpool Trading Card, which is a card that technically isn't even released yet. It just came out on April Fool's Day of all things. I actually didn't think it was real because, of course, April Fool's Day, but it just dropped, and I think it's probably already sold out, of course. But a really cool Deadpool secret lair out of nowhere with a really interesting card mechanic on, of course, our main man Deadpool. So Deadpool Trading Card is a Rakdos card, of course. 4 mana, he's a mutant mercenary hero. Got some weird new card types with that. He's a 5/3 and he's got a really cool text box. He says, whenever he enters, you may exchange his text box for another creature's. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 3 life. You may pay 3, sacrifice him. Each other player draws a card. So this deck is based around putting Deadpool on the battlefield and then switching his text box with one of our opponent's creatures' text box to get a way better, stat line or whatever, better effects for him, and then giving our opponents a really crappy one that makes them lose life at their upkeep, or, less draw cards if they don't want that to happen. So there are a lot of ways you can take this deck. I do think one of the more interesting ways is to do a mutate type deck, or just, generally, okay, I'm going to have something with a bunch of keywords and switch Deadpool's text box with my own creatures to, just have a really good, stat lined creature. But with this deck specifically, I decided to do copies, and I think I would consider this deck. I haven't been able to play test it too much because just in general, trying to goldfish a deck that relies on other people's cards is kind of difficult, but I also don't have the card quite yet. So this is kind of just a more experimental deck, but I do think it works pretty well, following the general guidelines of how a deck works. I'm sure it works fine. I've played a lot of these cards before, and I know they work pretty well. But we are going super heavy into the copy shenanigans. So we're just going to copy Deadpool over and over and over again, because though he is legendary, he can still, when he enters and you make a copy of him, he can steal the text box of an opponent's card. Yes, he'll die. Whatever that creature does, it doesn't matter. They now have the textbooks that Deadpool has, and it's just a lot better for us, and we can take away good cards from our opponent's creatures. It's kind of almost better than killing them, because now they just don't do anything. So that's kind of a cool thing there. We do have other ways in the deck that we can kind of get around that, but this is kind of the main game plan. Well, let's start at the beginning here with our board wipes. So the big thing here is, of course, we have Blasphemous Act as one of the 5 cards from the secret lair. It's actually a really cool secret lair, and one of the reasons I wanted to pick it up is because that's some amazing cards and amazing card art, and of course all of the the flavor text is just him quipping about the breaking the fourth wall and how magic does this, magic does that. And we also have Toxic Deluge. Blasphemous Act is just a staple. We run everything because it's usually 1 red mana for an amazing, almost full board like effect. And then Toxic Deluge, I'm super glad that Modern Horizons has made this card come down, because it was like $30, I'd like to say, for a long time, just very expensive for a board wipe. But it's actually, as the card, just very inexpensive as a board wipe. So for 3 mana, being able to pay life, not only is it getting around a lot of like indestructible creatures and that sort of thing, being able to kill them, but very much undercosted for a very efficient board wipe. It's nothing too big here in the board wipe scene, because we are a very creature heavy deck, and even more than most creature decks, because we want our opponent's creatures to stick around, because they're going to be having all of the gross looking text boxes. So we really don't want to board wipe almost at any point in the game, unless there's something crazy happening. But yeah, not a huge deal here, but you run what you can, because you every once in a while you kind of need that. Just kind of the bare minimums, are the vegetables, as a lot of people call them. And card advantage, nothing too crazy here, sort of our basic ones, but a few ones I kind of want to note, because I feel like not enough people run them, and they're still really, really good. So Daily Dispute, one of my favorite cards from, I think, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms was the original printing. Really awesome. 2 mana, sack a creature, artifact, draw 2 cards, create a treasure token. Really cool. Not only is it card draw, it's sort of ramp as well, which is really nice. Faithless Looting, of course, it's awesome to have the flashback, because even if it gets milled or whatever, cast it that way. And a lot of times I do cast this twice in a row just for, the hand sculpting. Really cool there. Of course, 1 mana, pretty hard to beat. Night's Whisper, again, is just an efficiently costed card draw spell. I really like to Read the Bones, because the scry is such a huge deal. Being able to, get a little bit of extra, look into your deck before you draw the cards is really nice. And the sort of cards I want to talk about the most here are the Reckless Impulse and Aren's Resolve. I love Impulse Draw. It's, very efficient in red as well. And I think it should be run a lot more, because yes, you don't get to play those cards forever. But, both Reckless Impulse and Aren's Resolve are until the end of your next turn, you get to play the cards, and you get 2 cards. So, you're getting a card per mana spent, which is really, really good. And as long as you're playing your lands off of this instead of anything else, even if you do get 2 lands, at the very least, if you haven't played your land drop that turn, you're getting to play both of those cards still. So that's really nice there. Thrill Possibility, of course, is just kind of a generically good one, but you do get more cards off of Reckless Impulse and Rin's Resolve. Overall, you're getting to see more and you're getting to keep more, but Thrill Possibility, again, is just kind of, generically good card advantage stuff. There's a few other things that do give us a little bit more card drop, but these are the ones that are definitely focused on the card advantage themselves. But the big meat and potatoes of the deck, of course, is, about a fourth of it being the clones. So stuff where we can copy our commander or, make it enter the battlefield as many times as possible is kind of the big thing here, and kind of how we can sort of profit off of that. So Blade of Selves, that's one of the best ways to do it. Just give Deadpool Myriad, so when he attacks, he creates 2 copies of himself that steal, the abilities of 2 different creatures. I'll come back wrong. This is one of my favorite kind of weird janky cards from Duskmourn. It destroys a creature, and then if a creature is put into a graveyard this way, you turn it to the battlefield under your control, second at the beginning of the next end step. So the best way to use this card is really, maybe your opponent has a really good creature with an ETB, like a Massacre Worm. You're like, okay, I want to use that and also get rid of that creature on my opponent's board. This kind of gives, the best effect for that. Destroy the creature, get it back for a turn. Nice there. But it also can be really nice with Deadpool, because it gives him the ability to enter multiple times as well. You can kill him, get him back, gets the ETB trigger, and then he gets sacked again, and then you can cast him again for your command zone. I don't think too often you're going to have to be casting him from the command zone either. I think his tax is going to stay relatively low because you're going to be copying him so many times that, even if he does end up dying, you're going to have 1 or 2 other copies that just copy again. Kashmir is one of my favorites because it's a mana rock that, enters, gets haste, and it can attack as well. Not always is this going to be super relevant because a lot of times it's just going to die immediately. But if you do get to keep it around, or even if you get rid of the original Deadpool for this, at the end of turn, it just turns off and becomes a mana rock by itself. So that's kind of nice there. Delina Wild Mage is really cool. At your combat, you choose a creature and roll a d20. 1 through 14, you create a tapped and attacking token that is that creature, except it's not legendary and has exiled this creature at the end of combat. So you do get to keep this for an entire turn, which can be nice. If someone's got like an Arcana Cruelty or something that also has an attack trigger, you get this creature, you attack it, and then you get a bunch of extra cool stuff with that. A lot of it's situational. That's kind of course, how the deck's going to work. The Dual Caster Mage, we'll kind of get back to him in a minute because he's got a little bit of extra going in the deck. I had to add him in here because, for the veterans already kind of know what this card is doing in here, but he can do a lot of cool stuff. Lecture Duplicate, again, just get a token of a creature you control, except it has haste and sack it, and it has flashback, so you can cast it again. Flame Shadow Conjuring is not a card I've seen a whole lot recently, but I think it's awesome. It feels like such a cool card. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay a red. If you do, put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. It just seems really, really good. Like, I'd probably put this in a dragon deck, get a little bit of extra value out of your dragons to be able to attack with them. For, 4 mana is not bad for the enchantment. Only paying 1 red, it's basically an extra sneak attack. Cast the creature, get the sneak attack again. Very, very cool with that. And next we have Fork, which in the most general sense is a copy spell. It doesn't immediately copy, our creatures, but it can copy the things that copy our creatures, so we can get a little bit of extra value there. And it also sort of is an interaction spell, and it's good played that way. Or if you're casting Deadpool or whatever, and someone casts a Fierce Guardianship or what have you, you can fork the counter spells and that sort of thing to counter the counter spell, of course, and be able to resolve your thing. So it kind of work in that way as well. But generally just kind of a good sort of toolboxy sort of card, but a lot of times it's just going to be copying or copy spells. Heat Shimmer, just create a copy of a thing. Helm of the Host is really cool because each combat of ours, we're going to be getting a copy of thing that we've equipped, except that token isn't legendary and it gains haste, so that's kind of one of our few ways to get around the legendary rule. I'm going to keep whatever Deadpool, whatever ends up being around. Jaxus, you can pay a red, discard a card, and tap her to create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control because it has haste. When it dies, you draw a card, second at the beginning of the next end step. So that's kind of nice because it immediately dies, and if we don't have the legend rule, we will at the very least get to get the dice trigger off of that. Kiki Jiki is obviously kind of just a generically good card in here, and it doesn't immediately work with Deadpool a lot of the times, but it's got a lot of combo potential. If you make a non-legendary copy of it, it can make non-legendary copies of that, and you can kind of just do that over and over and over again. There's a lot of infinites in here with that, and there are a few creatures in here that it would be just kind of nice to have extra copies of that aren't legendary, so there's that as well. Kindred Charge, this is kind of a cool one. You choose a creature type. For each creature you control of the chosen type, create a chosen creature token that is a copy of that. They gain haste to exile them. So the kind of generic, normal red copy stuff where you get it for a little bit. This one seems kind of weird at first because, you know, we're not really a typo deck in any sort of way. Though with cards like Mirror Box and Mirror Gallery, where we can kind of get around the legend rule, also one other card in here, Master Multiplied, are the ways we can kind of get a little bit of extra value out of this. It does kind of require a little bit of setup. It's not really good if you just have Deadpool out and that's all you're getting from him. So you need a little bit of extra for this card, but I think it can definitely work out. Once you have, you know, it's a little bit win more, but I think at that point, it's kind of an extra little fun card in here. And, you know, as many copies we can get in here just by itself. If you end up having to cast this, it could really end up saving you, you know, if someone's got something crazy out on the battlefield, you know, some sort of like Annihilator, Eldrazi, and you have to spend the mana for this, it's better to, you know, have this in your hand than not. But, you know, there's some cool stuff you can do with that if you manage to get a bunch of Deadpool tokens on the battlefield. Mirage Phalanx, it's got Soul Bond. When it enters, you choose another creature, and those creatures say at the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a token copy of them, except it's haste and loses the Soul Bond. So that's just kind of another sort of Helm of the Host effect, where just each combat you're making more of them. They do die, but not a huge deal. We just want more copies. Mirror Box, like I said, in Mirror Gallery, and same thing with Master Multiply. This one specific says legendary rule doesn't apply to creature tokens you control, but that's all we're making really is creature tokens. Mirror Box is a little bit better in that it gives legendary creature control +1/+1, and each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each creature you control with the same name as that creature. So if we do end up getting this, is probably the highest synergy card in the deck, really. If we can get any card on the battlefield, this is one we really want to make sure we have. Just high priority, really, among any of the other ones, because it does so much for the deck. So it's just a pop effect for the number of Deadpools we control, which is really, really cool. Mirror Gallery just kind of generically is just the legend rule, but, you know, that's so important for a deck that it's worth just having this in here, even if it's not the best rate for the effect. You know, not having blue makes us we have to kind of pick and choose our battles. Mirror March is really cool. So it's an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature enters, you flip a coin until you lose the flip, and then for each flip you won, you create a token copy of that creature. So we can get this down, get Deadpool down, and then, you know, see how far our luck gets us. And I think that's pretty, I don't know, it feels like it fits into the theme of Deadpool quite a lot. I do like that. And, you know, it's cool to see cards like this have a place somewhere, and I think this is a good deck for it. Non-duplication is kind of a newer one, but you can create a token of a target creature or artifact you control, and then it's an artifact in addition to its other types. You know, same thing, second being your next end step. The cool thing with Master Multiplied very specifically, not only does he have Myriad, which is pretty cool, he gets to keep his own tokens around, but triggered abilities you control can't cause you to sacrifice or exile creature tokens you control. So anytime we're making copies off of, you know, all of these things that say, oh, we have to sack them on our end step or whatever, if we have Master Multiplied out, this is another huge card for the deck, sort of, I would say, in the same vein of Mirror Box level of importance, because it allows us to keep our tokens around in multiple ways, not only because of legend rule, but those copies that we normally have to get rid of at the end of turn, we get to keep around, which is really, really nice. Ortheon, Hero of Lava Brink. So he's got two abilities here. You can pay 2 to just get the normal sort of copy effect where you create a target creature, and then for 9 mana you can create 5 tokens that are copies of another creature. That usually does not happen. Not a huge deal though, we don't really care too much about that. Just the repeatable on a body is really, really nice by itself. Rionia Fire Dancer, so this one's really cool. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you create X copies that are target of a creature you control, except where X is 1 plus the number of instant sorceries you cast this turn. They gain haste, whatever. So really the big thing here is this is kind of a weird specific one because it cares with the number of instants and sorceries we've cast this turn, though we have so many of them that are copy spells, so kind of just on top of what we're doing, you know, we're going to be casting 1 or 2 extra a lot of the time, so we kind of have that on top of that, and you know, there's a lot of other instant sorceries in the deck as well. There's quite a few. So most of the time, if you're ever going on the battlefield the next turn you have her out, you're going to be able to get 1 or 2 extra copies off of her, which is really nice. Sonhab, this is one of the other cool ones from the lair. Destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, you create 2 tokens that are copies of it, except they have half power and toughness rounded up. So if they're 1/1s, they stay 1/1s. This is, you know, just generically kind of good, and I think it's cool that it's in the secret lair because it's very obvious, hey, you know, this is something you can do with the card. So destroy Deadpool, get 2 token copies of him, sack 1, but you get 2 more ETB triggers, of course, which is the big thing there. And Twin Flame, of course, can be nice in a whole bunch of different ways. The fact that it has Strive, so you can target extra creatures for 3 extra mana per creature you target, and make token copies of them. So if you do, have Mirror Box or something out where you've gotten a bunch of Deadpools, you can, dump as much mana as you want to into this and get even more of them. So kind of more of a mass thing, though. Most of the time, just the 2 is good by itself. And before we get out of here, I will sort of talk about the combo here. So Dualcaster Mage very infamously goes infinite with most copy effects. You just are copying, something, let's say we have a Heat Shimmer, and then we cast Dualcaster Mage to copy that. We have, because he has Flash, you can do that while it's on the stack. When you do, he can copy that spell targeting himself. That copy resolves. You get a new one, he enters, makes a copy, makes a copy, makes a copy, makes a copy, and you can just do that forever, just not letting the original resolve and always targeting it to make a copy of it. So you have infinite Dualcaster Mages, and then they have haste. So that's sort of the 1-2 card combo. So I'd kind of throw this deck, I don't know if I said it already, but into a bracket 3. I wouldn't say quite bracket 4. It's a little too janky for something like that. Like, there's not a lot of tutors or anything in the deck. There might be one. I don't know if we have a Jessica's Will in here even. Not a lot of game changers. That's sort of the one weird sort of 2-card combo. But, it's, this deck's kind of going to be weird by itself. So I think that's not too bad. And a lot of times you don't have to do that. You can do that with a lot of different things. Though if you really, really wanted to, you could even, attach this to Deadpool as well. That'd be an easy thing to do there. Yeah, that's kind of all of our token shenanigans. There's a lot of other things that kind of help this game plan, but these are sort of the main things we're looking for in the deck to give us a bit of extra copying power. So with interaction, we do have a few things in here, and I am glad, I think Black, and especially Black nowadays, has gotten so much good stuff. Vandal Blast, really cool for this. I think I almost any deck, it's something I feel like with Fogs anymore, especially just Fog itself, people should be running in every deck that has, for Fog green and for red Vandal Blast. It's a card that, you should just run in there, get your artifact removal in there, but the fact that the overload, it can gimp so many decks. Me personally, I run a whole bunch of artifact decks, and even if you have a treasure deck or whatever, being able to cast this and just absolutely decimate people's boards a lot of time is really, really good for the 5 mana that it costs. Rakdos Charm, so this one's got the 2 effects. You can or the 3 effects, I should say. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Graveyard hate is kind of the main thing here for me, at least. Destroy target artifact, kind of nice. And then the last one, which we probably won't be doing almost ever, is that each creature deals 1 damage to its controller, because a lot of times we're going to have a lot of creatures out, so you want to be kind of careful with that. Most of the time, that's the thing that you're going to be picking. Funeral Grasp, but just kind of a good spell, sort of non-conditional destroy. Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment are one of the only few good enchantment removals in Black, and there's none in red, so these are what we kind of have to run. Chaos Warp is just a catch-all. This could be a lot of different things, and a lot of times I've just used this on my own cards, honestly. Like, if I'm in a bad enough spot, I'll just, I've got a token laying around, I've got a treasure, I'm gonna see if I can flip something different, especially when you're, you got a high amount of permanents in the deck. You might as well, ramp one or something, whatever you can do, though this is, just kind of a catch. I'll get whatever we need from our opponent's boards as well. And of course, probably the best card from the secret layer here. I think Deadly Rollick is sitting around $45 right now. Pretty insane price, even after its reprint Commander Masters, though. It's a master set that's gonna not lower the price too much, because it's a sort of deluxe thing here. But we got Deadly Rollick, very, very good. One of the few exile spells for Black, and with the condition of controlling Deadpool, you're able to do it for free, and that's kind of the big thing here, is getting a free removal spell out of it. Pretty cool, but nothing too heavy, and I've pointed this out with a lot of my past videos. I'm pretty interaction light, because my pods and my sort of play groups end up being pretty light on interaction, so I don't run a whole bunch myself. This is one of those areas you could very easily, put an extra 4 cards into. There's plenty of cards in the game, especially in Black, that you could very easily throw in here that I just haven't. And tons of variations of a destroy target non-creature type creature, like Shoot the Sheriff or, Power Word Kill, that sort of thing. Very, even go for the throw. There'd be a lot of extra in here that you throw in, but this is kind of what we're working with here. And we are running quite a few lands. You want to make sure that we're hitting our land drops. We can be very mana hungry in this deck, because we're trying to copy as many times as we can. Some of our cards also can, like Twin Flame, we want to make sure we have a bunch of mana to throw into this. Ortheon does have a giant ability if you wanted to cast that for as much as possible. And Helm of the Host is a really good card, but to play it and equip it is 9 mana. So you kind of got to be careful with that. And even, you know, Blade of Selves, to be able to equip it, is a total of 6 mana. So you want quite a bit of mana. I mean, even something like Mirror Gallery, you know, Mirage Phalanx, a lot of these cards are fairly high mana cost. So having, you know, good amount of land, so we are hitting our land drops every single time is very important. You know, and there's, you know, not a super intensive mana base in terms of value. This deck isn't even $200 down here. They're just, you know, a lot of good dual lands anymore that are pretty cheap because they've managed to reprint them over and over. There's no, you know, fetches or nothing in here. You don't need it like crazy in this deck. You're only running 2 colors, and we very much favor red. You know, a lot of our copy shenanigans, so not too bad in the lands category. The only one I will point out here that I think is kind of cool, and I'll kind of get to it a little bit later, is Forbidden Orchard. Because whenever you tap it, you give someone a colorless spirit token. That's really cool because, you know, normally that's supposed to be the drawback of this card, but when you give them that token, that is then something that you can play Deadpool and immediately give them the text box of Deadpool, even if you don't get something in return. It's nice to just have something on their board that you know you can just kind of deal out and be able to make sure that when you are copying Deadpool, it's for a reason and you're not just stuck with whatever, you know, having to lose life at your upkeep as well. Kind of keeping them loaded with creatures too. And then ramp, we have quite a lot of ramp. Like I said, this is sort of a mana-hungry deck. You don't need something super crazy here. Like there's Pyretic Ritual. It's kind of just generically good. It's nice for this deck because Deadpool is 4 mana, and so you want to get him out as fast as possible. So being able to do that with Pyretic Ritual, getting that little extra mana that a lot of times will get us a turn early. Same thing with Soul Ring and Seething Song. You can pay for most of his stuff there. A Ruby Medallion. We aren't running Jet Medallion in this deck because, again, we very much favor red, and there's not a lot of stuff that we need, a whole lot of generic mana symbols for our black cards. And then a lot of, you know, just our good mana rocks and that sort of thing. And then Battle Hymn, you know, we're going to be controlling quite a few creatures a lot of the time, so getting a bunch of mana off of that is really nice. And then Mana Geyser, you know, I've seen this card win games just because of how much mana it gives you. Like, if most people are tapping out for the mana because, you know, if they're doing, you know, had a good game plan by the time you're casting this on your 5th turn, hopefully that you're in the last seat at the table. Get 15 mana for casting this for 5, just kind of generically good, though. You know, you could add stuff like in here, like Jessica's Will and that sort of thing, but this is sort of a lower budget deck. Just I wanted to make it sort of a casual, easy to build deck because, you know, brand new card and a lot of people want to try it out. But sort of at the end here, we have our value cards, and so these sort of kind of do similar things, but they weren't very much worthy of their own categories, and that's sort of why I put them in the value category, where they're just kind of like generic value for the deck, sort of add to the game plan, but don't, you know, have a big overarching theme to them. So Anger, of course, I love the little baby Anger. It's one of my favorite artworks in the game. I got introduced to it just recently, but I think it's really good. Of course, this is just a generically good card for the deck. It gets in your graveyard, just gives all your stuff haste, which is nice. We do have a few things because we are going to be, you know, having our creatures die, and we are going to have, you know, having to sack creatures and that sort of thing. We do have like Blood Artist, and this is also nice for our opponents because a lot of times, you know, they're going to want to sack the creature that is making them lose life every turn. But if they do that with like Blood Artist type effects, they're going to be dealt damage because of that. Whenever their creatures die, they also get dealt damage for that, which is kind of nice. You can get a little bit of extra off of that. But just like, you know, our Forbidden Orchard here, we have 3 creatures in here that give our creatures, or our opponents creatures. And that's really big for the deck because if our opponents don't have creatures down, let's say someone's playing Super Friends, you don't really care about their game plan. You can't really do much to them because they don't have stuff out. So, you know, you don't want to be casting all of your copy stuff and that sort of thing. Our deck relies so heavily on our opponents having creatures, so if they don't have them, being able to give them a few is also really nice. So Clackbridge Troll, 5 mana, 8/8, trample and haste, which is pretty awesome. When it enters, target opponent gets 3/0/1 white goat creature tokens. At the beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If they do, tap Clackbridge Troll, you gain 3 life and draw a card. So it kind of has a lot of weirdness on it. But the big thing here is you're giving your opponents 3 creatures that you can then switch out text box. It does allow them to sack creatures, but it's not a huge deal. And if you really wanted to, you could probably switch around text boxes with this and not really have to deal with what it's doing. But even if they do sack stuff, you're still getting basically what you would get if they were sacking with their own ability. You actually gain the life and draw a card. So that can be cool as well. You know, you're not really losing anything for that. And like I said, the giving them creatures is the big part. Sim Hunting Bone Brute. It's a 3 mana 6/2 with Menace. When it enters, target opponent gets 2/1 white dog, 1/1 white dog creature tokens, and when it dies, each opponent loses 3 life. So mostly giving them creatures, though, because we are giving our opponents creatures, it does have a pretty cool stat line. Haunted Horror, probably the coolest one of the bunch. 2 black for a 7/7 with Trample, which is pretty crazy. But when it enters, you give target opponent 2 3/3 Centaur creature tokens with protection from black. So this is like one of the few token creators that actually, the tokens aren't too bad, because by itself, if you just have 2 mana 7/7 with Trample, that's kind of insane. So having them, have protection from black is sort of that counterbalance. But of course, if you're stealing that with Deadpool, just any protection from any color most of the time is really nice. But the pro black is really cool because you get around a lot of removal spells that people would use in that color. And of course, it's a lot harder to block something if you don't have protection from black. And then down here, we've got a few things. Witty Roastmaster, Molten Gatekeeper, and Impact Tremors all say when creatures enter our battlefield, each opponent loses a life or takes 1 damage specifically. So when we're making all of our creature tokens, they do enter and die, or they stick around. We're putting stuff on the battlefield, they'll take extra damage from that, might as well. Mayhem Devil, this is another thing, sort of the Blood Artist type of effect. There's not a lot of effects in the game that say if opponent's creatures die, you get stuff or stuff happens. But the 2 big ones here, Mayhem Devil, whenever opponent or player sacrifices a permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target. Really awesome for a lot of reasons. Of course, like treasure tokens are one of the biggest ones here, but they are sacrificing the whatever things that we swap out with Deadpool, and that's kind of the big thing here. But it does a lot of different things, and if someone is playing some sort of clue or food or treasure deck, whatever they end up sacrificing, even if they're playing aristocrats, Mayhem Devil is just great for that because you get to punish them for it. Sort of the last one here, I'll also get the Fable of the Meteor Breaker. It's just got a lot of stuff on it. And it kind of fell into a bunch of categories, which is why I kind of put in the value thing here. But Wind Reflection, there are a lot of versions of this in the game. And I didn't want to kind of muddle it up too much. But just as at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to life they lost this turn. So that turns the 3 life that they're losing for the creatures with Deadpool's upkeep ability into 6 life, which is a lot worse. People play Mana Crypt and didn't bat an eye at the 3 damage they take every turn. But 6 is a lot more than that, double that even. And that adds up, it'll add up way faster per creature that you manage to give them, which is really nice. And then, of course, it's just kind of a generically good effect. There's a lot of others you could run in here, but I just wanted to add one little one in here as sort of an extra little win more on top of everything. But Fable of the Mirror Breaker, this kind of does a lot of different stuff. So not only it creates you a 2/2 Goblin Shaman when it enters initially on its first Saga trigger, that when it attacks, create a treasure token, so it gives you a body kind of whatever. I know that's pretty good for 60 card formats. That's a big deal, but really, the second one's nice. It's sort of a Faithless Looting moduli, where you can discard up to 2 cards. If you do, you draw that many cards. And then the final one is kind of the big one for this deck specifically, and that you get a Kiki Jiki. You pay 1, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature control, except it has haste. You check it at the next end step. So this is just another Kiki Jiki, quite literally. That's the whole point. And there are a bunch of ways this could go infinite as well, but kind of just another generically good card that does quite a few things. Even getting the Goblin token's not too bad if you, save it for a turn, manage to attack with the next turn, or maybe, you end up copying it, so you get the token copy, you're able to attack, ramp a little bit by getting the treasure token, what have you. But yeah, kind of generically good. Does a lot of different stuff for the deck, and has come down in price since its bannings and a lot of different things. So it's kind of cool to start putting this in decks now that it's not super expensive for the kind of card draw, kind of generically good card that it is. But yeah, that is the deck list, our sort of weird Deadpool copy shenanigans deck. We're just trying to get him on the battlefield over and over and over again and switch him out with our opponent's cards. I think this is kind of an interesting one. I'm fairly sure it's going to be kind of janky, but I know a lot of people are going to want to build this because, of course, it's Deadpool. People love Deadpool. I love Deadpool. I didn't just buy this. I thought it had a lot of great value. But I'm a huge Deadpool fan, and I think it'd be fun to build around. I do actually want to build another version of this deck that is focused on its own creatures, the mutate type stuff where you just stack up a huge creature and get a bunch of extra value off of that. Maybe that'll be another video for another time. I'm probably going to do a bunch of extra ones for this kind of thing. I do like permutations of deck. I think it's kind of fun, but that is all for this deck list. I really hope all of you have enjoyed it. If you want to check out the Moxfield deck that I've got here, take a look in the description below for that link. Also, if you want to check out the playlist of all the deck lists I've done on the channel, make sure to also check out that in the description below. But besides all of that, I will see all of you in the next one.